Okay, viewers. I knew there would be a day where I'd have to break from the driving theme of this channel for some unforeseen reason. My dedication to the Showa collection of Godzilla kaiju and films they inhabit is still a vast ocean to cross, and while I don't object to any other era of Godzilla films, I do like to keep things focused on the films I grew up with, the ones that made me a fan. So that being said, this video will dance the line between two eras, and you'll see why. The first is still very much Showa, and the second is skipping the Heisei and putting some spotlight on the Millennium series. The big question is, what vinyl kaiju has a near-perfect place in both era collections? One of the more prominent female monsters from the pantheon of Toho's giant monster films, Mothra, is a kaiju that has many, many fans. She is arguably the second most recognizable of Godzilla's allies. Her filmography not only includes her self-titled solo film debut, but guest starring often in Godzilla films from 1964 till this very year with an appearance in Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. Now granted, half of her appearances were as her larval form, but it counts. But as an adult imago, 1962's Mothra, 1964's Mothra vs. Godzilla, 1965's Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, 1992's Godzilla vs. Mothra, a brief cameo in Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, a heavily redesigned one in GMK, and Godzilla Tokyo S.O.S, also in which the near-perfect marionette was reused in Godzilla Final Wars. And let us not forget the MonsterVerse appearances in Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, though through another distinct redesign. She has also spawned her own mini-franchise at the tail end of the Heisei era with the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy, which features her male offspring Mothra Leo and his numerous forms he evolves throughout the films. At first glance, she's not very monster-esque. She looks, as her name implies, like a massive, colorful moth, hardly what many would consider frightening. But Mothra is a massive creature, especially in her first few appearances, including her debut film and in Mothra vs. Godzilla, where she dwarfs the King of the Monsters. Which brings us to the point of this review. When Godzilla Tokyo S.O.S arrived in theaters, Bandai released a gorgeous vinyl rendition of Mothra, and because of the version's faithfulness to the original look, this figure can also be a wonderful stand-in for your own Showa display. See where I'm going with this? Both in an all-around aesthetic and style, Tokyo S.O.S is likely the best version of the classic queen in a Bandai vinyl format. Is it perfect? Well, let's get into that. This is a pretty impressive rendition of Mothra. What surprises me the most is that what Bandai was able to achieve with the vinyl materials. The body is fairly solid feeling, while the wings have a more flexible vinyl, perhaps due to the hollowness. However, nothing feels too compromised, no overly thick wings or distorted proportions for an insect kaiju. For some context, I used to own the 1992 Mothra figure from Godzilla vs. Mothra. You know the one, the brittle plastic wings and the neat flocking to give her the fuzzy feels. And while it was an amazing showpiece, she didn't stand the test of time. Otherwise, she'd be here to compare. But it was a large vinyl, and it was my definitive Mothra in terms of what I wanted in scale and color. But it wasn't perfect, because again, Bandai at the time were not doing detailed replicas of the actual suits and props, but more or less an idealized versions of the kaiju. Hence, Mothra was a bit too round and neat. Its tiny plastic chicken legs were not permanent fixtures and could easily be lost if removed from their sockets. With the Tokyo S.O.S version, not only do I get a very decent sized beast, but it's also well sculpted, with the fuzziness now carved into the mold. Passing glance, you'd easily mistake this for the Godzilla vs. the Thing version, and you wouldn't be at fault. The biggest giveaways are the legs, which were redesigned and no longer are bright yellow and outstretched like chicken legs, but rather a warm caramel and tucked under her. Her massive wings also sport fuzzy dark brown lining on the front edges, a trait I believe was not from the original 1964 marionette. Outside of those differences, Bandai does a well enough job of including Mothra's front antenna, two prominent top ones jutting from the upper shaggy brows and the smaller feelers flanking the closed mandibles. The eyes are nicely textured with a pockmarked pattern, lined by a nice dark ringlet. Mothra's body is sculpted with even more furry details. Her back is a fluffy lining where the wings meet the body, and her thorax has that trademark ringed pattern. Finally, the most important feature, the wings themselves, have a very nice variety of textures. A series of ribbed lines sprout outward from the furry center connectors, and interestingly enough, the distinct color patterns are outlined in the mold, despite not always matching up with the actual paint application. Speaking of colors, I would argue that this is one of the most colorful figures in terms of color count. Molded in a cream white vinyl, only the fluffy eyebrows, antenna, lower body, thorax lines, and parts of the inner wings reveal the base color. Her eyes are a vibrant metallic aqua blue, suggesting the glowing nature of them on film. The dark black-brown color is used to great effect to line the eye, rims, and mandibles, the tips of her lower antenna, tip of the abdomen, and the rear and majority of her wings, negative spaces. A lighter, warmer brown is used on the tips of her upper antenna, the abdomen segments, and her underbelly, including those previously mentioned arms. And an orange-tinged brown fills her inner wings. A more vibrant orange is used on the minor wings in the back, and the main wings are broken up by a bright yellow zigzagging like lightning bolts. All in all, a beautiful paint job, which is a rarity by today's standards of Bandai's offerings. Mothra, as expected, isn't a figure you can garner much movement out of, but the head can rotate, so she can look upside down, I suppose. This is for more subtle poses, actually, with it slightly tilted, but outside of that, you can't do much else. Also, while not a matter of articulation, it would be best advised to get a stand of some sort to display her, otherwise she's going to look like she just died sitting on the ground. Just saying. An obvious choice for pairing two figures together in this segment would be for the recently released Bandai Godzilla 1964, a fantastic figure, but rather than retread that, you can check out my review for him on the link above. For these side-by-sides, I've decided to go with more non-bipedal beasties. This figure is my default larva for the Showa shelf. It's one of the OG versions, but still holds up really well by today's standards. I wish I had two to simulate the larval twins from Mothra vs. Godzilla, but even one version will do. Of course, I do have another version. This is a good rendition, even if it's from the 1996 rebirth of Mothra film, so technically this is a baby Leo. The coloring being a bit lighter gives me the original 1962 Mothra larva vibes. Another kaiju who sort of lays flat, Ibra is basically a giant sea bug anyway, so it makes sense that these two share the same space since both appeared in Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. Again, I have a love for the insecty type kaiju as much as I do the dinosaurian ones, and if you like lobster also, check out my review for this figure in the link above. Hey, another kaiju that flies, and not much else. This is also a study in size comparisons, as this guy comes off at fairly large in hand. While Mothra has nothing to do with Hedorah in terms of films, this would also be an interesting match. Not trying to turn this video into a channel promo, but you can also check out my review for this pollution pancake in the link. You got it, above. Yeah, like I said, I broke the norm by featuring a more modern take on a classic kaiju, despite looking basically the same as the original version. But honestly, if you can find one at a decent price, the Tokyo S.O.S. Mothra from 2003 is a fine stand-in for your Showa display. While Bandai has released a newer, smaller scaled one for the modern movie monster series, it lacks the fine details and much of the gorgeous paintwork that the larger one has. Plus, you'll want Mothra to be huge because she is. Sure, there's not much in terms of articulation, but that is to be expected going into a figure that is basically a giant butterfly. Mothra at best will serve as a largely visible prop piece in the same manner as Flying Stage Hedorah. It's hard to deny one of Toho's most popular monsters a space on your shelf, considering her status in the kaiju hierarchy. But as always, I will defer to Jet Jaguar to lend a hand, her fist, to the final word. 6 punches is perfectly acceptable for a near-perfect vinyl. As I stated, this is both visually gorgeous, both in terms of sculpted paint. The size is what I wanted for the adult form, and despite not being wholly accurate to a Showa model, she comes pretty damn close. And you'll be hard-pressed to find anything better. What do you think? Do you have this version of Mothra? What are your thoughts? Do you think there is a better Bandai release? Comment down below and feel free to express your thoughts. Ask questions or even disagree. I welcome your takes on what makes for a good shelf piece, and I'm always interested in what my audience's tastes are. And if there's a Showa character you'd like me to review in the future, please let me know. As always, I am grateful to my viewers, and I recently passed 100 subscribers, which in this day and age isn't anything to some content creators. But to me, every little step forward is an achievement, so thank you all for subscribing. If you are new to this channel, please consider liking this video, sharing it, and of course, the big favor, subscribing. I still have plenty of videos coming down the pipeline, so I hope you'll all stay tuned. Thanks for watching.